Here's something nobody tells you about getting older. It's not the gray hair. It's not the knees that sound like bubble wrap every time you stand up. It's not even the way young people start talking to you slowly, like your ears aged faster than the rest of you. No. What nobody warns you about is the moment you come home from a perfectly good fishing trip in Colorado, slide your key into your front door, and the lock just refuses you. Just flat out says no. Welcome back to Dad's True Revenge. Grab your snacks, get comfortable, and remember, the people in these stories had every chance to behave themselves. They just chose wrong. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. You're going to love it here. I stood there on my porch. Ted Branson, 64 years old, retired logistics manager, man who once parallel parked an 18-wheeler on a Tuesday afternoon in downtown Chicago. Standing at my own front door like a stranger, I jiggled the key. Nothing. I flipped it over. Tried again. Still nothing. I looked at the key. I looked at the door. I looked back at the key. You have got to be kidding me. Now before you laugh, and I know you want to, understand that I had just driven 9 hours from Glenwood Springs with a cooler full of trout, a sunburned neck, and the quiet satisfaction of a man who had successfully avoided his wife's book club for an entire week. I was supposed to walk through that door a hero. Instead, I'm standing on my own porch like a Jehovah's Witness who forgot his pamphlets. I called Ryan. The phone rang twice, which if you know my son means he was already expecting the call. Ryan never picks up on the first ring. Says it makes him look desperate. 31 years old and still playing phone games. I raised that boy. I know all his tricks. Hey, Dad. His voice had something in it. Something careful. Like a man walking across ice, testing every word before he put his weight on it. Ryan, I said, keeping my voice even. I'm standing at my front door. My key doesn't work. Would you like to explain to your father why his key doesn't work? The kind that comes after someone has practiced a conversation in the mirror 3 times and still isn't ready. Dad, we need to talk. Son, I said, I drove 9 hours. I have fish in my cooler. My back hurts. My neck looks like a grilled salmon. We can talk, but make it fast and make it make sense. I heard him exhale. We sold the house, Dad. Now here is where I should tell you that I exploded. That I went full Ted Branson, which anyone who knew me at 40 would tell you involved at least 2 raised voices, 1 pointed finger, and a very colorful vocabulary. But I didn't. I just stood there, and somewhere in the back of my mind, in that quiet, dark corner I'd been trying to ignore for about 8 months, something clicked. Oh, that part of me whispered, it's starting. I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around and there was Gloria, my Gloria, 29 years of marriage Gloria, walking up the porch steps with her hands folded in front of her, like she was approaching a crime scene. Which technically she was. Ted, she said softly. Gloria. I looked at her, really looked at her, and I saw it, the red rims around her eyes, the way she was holding her breath, the slight tremor in her chin she always gets when she's trying not to cry but has already decided she won't let herself. You knew, I said. She nodded once, small, ashamed. You'll be better off, Ted. We all agreed. We, I repeated, we. So there was a meeting, a whole meeting about my life, and nobody sent me a memo. Ted, please. Was there a PowerPoint, Gloria? Did Ryan bring snacks? I want to know if my life was discussed over chips and dip, or if you at least ordered pizza. She almost smiled. Almost. That almost smile, that's 29 years right there. She knows my humor is armor. She's always known. I sat down on the porch steps, and that's when it hit me. The full weight of it. Not the house. Not the key. Not even Gloria's red-rimmed eyes. The fact that I wasn't surprised. I should have been furious. I should have been blindsided. I should have been a man standing in front of a locked door, with absolutely no idea why. But deep down, underneath the fishing trip and the sunburned neck and the 9-hour drive, I knew. I pulled out my phone and opened my texts. Conrad Mills, my lawyer, 20 years, the man who'd handled my father's estate and my business contracts, and one very regrettable dispute with a neighbor over a property line in 2009. I typed slowly. Conrad, it's Ted. Quick question. How much time did the doctor say I had left? I stared at that message for a long moment before I hit send. Because here's the thing they don't tell you about early-stage dementia. And pay attention here because this is the part that will keep you up at night. It doesn't take everything at once. It's not like the movies where one day the man is sharp and the next day he's lost. No, it's sneakier than that. It takes things quietly, selectively. Like a thief who only steals one item per visit so you don't notice anything is missing until one day you reach for something important, and it's gone. For me, it started with small things. Keys in the freezer, appointments I'd made and completely forgotten, a conversation with Fletcher Boyd from next door, well, from what used to be next door, where he mentioned something I'd told him the previous week that I had absolutely zero memory of saying. I'd laughed it off. Fletcher, you know me. I say all kinds of things. But then came Tuesday, I got in my car to drive to the hardware store and ended up parked outside my old office building downtown, a building I hadn't worked in for 6 years. I sat in that parking lot for a long time. Then I drove myself straight to see Dr. Joanne Briggs. I remember sitting in her office, that office with the aggressively cheerful potted plant by the window that I always suspected was fake, and listening to her talk. Her voice was steady and kind and devastatingly gentle, in the way that doctors get when they're about to hand you something heavy. Ted, she said, leaning forward slightly, what we're seeing is consistent with early-stage Alzheimer's. Now, early stage means it gets worse, I said. She didn't flinch. I appreciated that about her. It means we have time to plan. And planning, Ted, good, clear planning right now, is the most powerful thing you can do. Planning. I almost laughed. Ted Brenson, 64 years old, planned everything his entire life. Planned his career. Planned his retirement. Planned the fishing trips, the investments, the college funds, the contingencies. Now I had to plan my own disappearance. So I did. I called Ryan on a Thursday evening. I remember because the game was on and I muted it, which tells you how serious I was. I told him everything. The diagnosis, the visits to Dr. Briggs, the Tuesday I lost in the parking lot downtown. I told him what I needed him to do, what I needed both of them, him and Gloria, to do when the time came. Dad, Ryan said, and his voice cracked in a way I hadn't heard since he was 17. Dad, are you sure? I'm sure right now, I told him, and right now is all I've got. I made him promise. He promised, and then, in the quiet, cruel irony that apparently runs this universe, I forgot I asked. So there I was. Porch steps. Cooler full of trout. Sunburned neck. Locked out of my own house by a plan I designed, approved, and signed off on personally. My phone buzzed. Conrad Mills. Ted. Glad you reached out. Call me when you're ready. There's quite a bit we need to go over. I read it twice. Then I looked up at Gloria, still standing there, watching me with those careful eyes. I planned this, didn't I? I said. It wasn't a question. Her voice broke open like something that had been holding itself together for a very long time. Yes, Ted, she whispered. You did. I nodded slowly. I looked out at the street, at the oak tree in the front yard I'd planted the year Ryan was born, at the mailbox I'd put in crooked and never fixed because Gloria said she liked that it leaned, said it had character. I breathed in. Well, I said quietly, I always was the smartest guy in the room. Gloria sat down beside me on the steps, and for a long moment, neither of us said anything at all. What Ted doesn't know yet is that Conrad Mills isn't just holding medical records. He's holding a letter Ted wrote to himself. On the last day, Ted was completely sure of who he was. If you've made it this far, do us one quick favor. Subscribe. A lot of people watch without ever doing it, but it costs you nothing and means everything to us. Thank you. Genuinely. Let me tell you something about Conrad Mills. The man has been my lawyer for 20 years. 20 years. He handled my father's estate when my brothers were ready to go to war over a toolbox and a 1987 Ford pickup. He negotiated 3 business contracts that saved my company from going under in 2008. He once talked a judge into dismissing a property line dispute that, look, that's a whole other story, and Fletcher Boyd knows exactly what he did. The point is, Conrad Mills is unshakable. So when I walked into his office the following morning, and he stood up from behind his desk, looked at me with something I had never seen on that man's face in 20 years, and said absolutely nothing for a full 4 seconds, I knew whatever was in that office was going to rearrange my furniture. Ted, he finally said, extending his hand. Sit down. Conrad, I said, shaking it. You're looking at me like I have a terminal illness. You called me yesterday asking how much time the doctor said you had left. Fair point, I said. I'll sit down. His office smelled like old wood and expensive coffee, the kind of smell that says serious things happen here. There was a manila folder on the desk between us. Thick, organized. Very Ted Branson, I thought. Whoever put that together had a system. Turns out that whoever was me. Before we go through everything, Conrad said, settling into his chair and lacing his fingers together the way he does when he's about to deliver a verdict, I need to ask you something. And I need you to be honest with me, Conrad. I've been honest with you for 20 years. You told me you were fine in 2019 when you had walking pneumonia. I was mostly fine. He gave me the look. The lawyer look. The one that says I've heard every version of this story, and none of them hold up. Ted, do you remember coming to see me 8 months ago? I held his gaze. 8 months ago. I turned the calendar back in my head. Slowly, carefully, the way you test old floorboards before you put your full weight on them. 8 months ago was March. March was Gloria's birthday, the fishing license renewal, the appointment with Dr. Briggs where she used the word progressive for the first time, and I drove home on autopilot and sat in my driveway for 20 minutes before going inside. I remember March, I said carefully. Most of it. Conrad nodded slowly. You came in on a Thursday afternoon. You were alone. You told me you'd just come from Dr. Briggs. You were. He paused, choosing his word. Very clear, very focused. You said you wanted to get everything in order while you still could. Something moved through my chest. I couldn't name it exactly. It wasn't quite sadness. It wasn't quite fear. It was more like standing at the edge of a photograph and recognizing the man in it but not quite feeling like him anymore. What did I do? I asked. Conrad opened the folder. You updated your will. You restructured the property transfer to Ryan and Gloria. You created a healthcare directive. You set up a memory care fund. He paused. And you wrote a letter. The room got very quiet. A letter, I repeated. To yourself. Conrad reached into the folder and slid a sealed envelope across the desk. My own handwriting stared back at me. For Ted. Open when you've forgotten you wrote this. I stared at it for a long time. Now listen. I've held a lot of things in my life. My son the day he was born. My father's hand the day he died. The keys to my first truck. My first office. My first home. I've held things that were heavy, and things that were precious, and things that were both at the same time. But I have never held anything quite like that envelope, because it wasn't just paper. It was me, the version of me that still had everything locked in place, reaching across time to grab the collar of the version of me that was starting to drift. I came in alone? I asked. You told Gloria you were running errands, Conrad said quietly. I almost laughed. Of course I did. Ted Branson doesn't ask for help. Ted Branson handles things. Ted Branson drives himself to the lawyer's office with a diagnosis in his pocket and a plan in his briefcase and tells his wife he's picking up milk. Do you want a moment? Conrad asked. No, I said. I want coffee. And then I opened the letter. The handwriting was mine. Firm, slightly impatient. The way I write when I have too much to say and not enough time to say it. I could tell I'd written it fast. No crossing out, no hesitation. Just a man talking directly at the page like he was running out of runway. It started simply. Ted, if you're reading this, you forgot. That's okay. You planned for that too. I had to stop for a second. Because even written down, I could hear my own voice. And there is something deeply unsettling about being surprised by yourself. I kept reading. By now, Ryan has done what you asked him to do. He's probably terrified he did the wrong thing. Tell him he didn't. Tell him you're proud of him. He needs to hear it more than you think. You've never been great at saying it out loud, and you know that. I looked up at Conrad. He was studying his coffee cup with tremendous focus, giving me the privacy of pretending he wasn't in the room. I went back to the letter. Gloria is holding it together because that's what she does. But she's not okay, Ted. She hasn't been okay since March. Don't let her keep pretending. You always let her carry things quietly because it was easier than asking. Don't do that anymore. You don't have the luxury of easy anymore. My jaw tightened. 29 years of marriage, and the man I was 8 months ago still knew exactly where to press. The house is handled. The money is handled. Dr. Briggs has everything she needs. Conrad has the rest. You don't need to worry about the logistics. You already did. You were always good at logistics, even when you were terrible at everything else. What I need you to do now is simpler and harder. I need you to stop being embarrassed. I need you to let Ryan be your son without you trying to manage how he sees you. I need you to sit in the same room as Gloria without performing. She married Ted Branson, not the version that has everything under control. The real one. And I need you to enjoy whatever time you have left that looks like normal, because normal is going to start getting expensive pretty soon. Don't waste it being stoic. You were never actually as tough as you pretended. You just had good posture. Ted, March 14th. P.S. The trout in Colorado are better in the Eastern Fork, not the main river. You probably already figured this out, but just in case. I sat there. Conrad still wasn't looking at me. The aggressively cheerful plant in the corner, and yes, I checked it was real, which somehow made everything slightly worse, rustled faintly from the air conditioning. Ted, Conrad said finally. You okay? The man who wrote that letter, I said slowly, was considerably wiser than I currently feel. He was you. Yeah, well. I folded the letter carefully. I've gone downhill. Conrad almost smiled. Almost. 20 years and I can count on one hand how many times I've gotten a full smile out of Conrad Mills. It's basically a standing competition between us at this point. He slid the rest of the folder toward me. There are some things we need to go over. Timelines, care arrangements, the transition plan for the house. Ryan is listed as primary. Gloria has full oversight of all decisions. You were very thorough. Of course I was, I said. I'm a logistics man. You also left instructions, Conrad said. And now something shifted in his voice, something quieter, for how you want to be spoken to. When things get further along, what you want people to call you, what music you want playing, what you don't want said in front of you. I hadn't expected that one. I left a playlist? Sinatra. Mostly. Good, I said. I always had excellent taste. I picked up the folder, held it the way you hold something you're not ready to fully own yet but know you have to carry anyway. Conrad, I said, did I seem, when I came in that day, did I seem scared? Conrad was quiet for just a moment. You seemed, he said carefully, like a man who had decided that fear was not a productive use of his remaining clarity. I nodded slowly. That sounds about right. I stood up, tucked the folder under my arm, slid the letter into my inside jacket pocket, right against my chest, right where a man keeps the things that matter. Conrad, I said at the door. Ted, you're a good man. He looked at me steadily. So are you, Ted. I walked out into the morning, sat in my car for a moment. Didn't drive anywhere mysterious this time. Just sat. Let the sun come through the windshield the way it does in late October. Low and golden and slightly blinding, like the world is trying to show you something beautiful, right before it takes it away. Then, I called Ryan. He picked up on the first ring, which told me everything I needed to know about how my son had been sleeping lately. Dad? His voice was tight, wound up, ready for whatever version of his father was on the other end of the line. Ryan, I said. I read the letter. I need you to come over tonight, bring whatever that casserole thing Gloria likes from that place on Merchant Street, and tell her I said, I stopped, cleared my throat. Tell her I said she doesn't have to pretend anymore. I heard my son breathe. Dad, he said, and his voice did the thing again. That crack, that 17-year-old crack. Are you okay? I looked out at the October morning. I'm clear today, I said. And today's what we've got. But what Ted doesn't know yet is that the letter had a second page, one that Conrad hadn't shown him. Not yet. If you've been listening for a while and want stories like this to keep coming, it really helps if you hit that like button and subscribe. 97% of people never do, but it's what keeps this whole thing running. So thank you for real. Let me tell you something about secrets. Most people think a secret is something you hide from other people. But the cruelest kind, the kind that really gets under your skin at 2 a.m. when the house is quiet and the darkness has opinions, is the kind you hide from yourself. I found out about the second page on a Wednesday, 3 days after the porch steps, 2 days after Conrad's office, 1 day after Ryan showed up with Gloria's casserole and we sat around a table that used to be in our dining room, now apparently in Ryan's kitchen, which still felt like finding your favorite coat on a stranger, and had the most honest conversation our family had managed in probably 15 years. It wasn't easy. Nothing about it was easy. But it was real. And real, I was learning, was the only currency that still had value. Ryan had cried. He'd tried to hide it, because he is my son, and we Bransons have historically treated vulnerability like a scheduling conflict. Acknowledge it briefly, move past it quickly, never speak of it again. But Gloria put her hand over his and said, "Let it out, baby." And he did. And then, God help me, so did I. Which, for the record, is not something Ted Brenson does at a dinner table, or anywhere with witnesses, or frankly anywhere at all. I once watched my father's entire eulogy without flinching, and I considered that a personal achievement. But there I was, 64 years old, crying into a casserole in my son's kitchen. And somehow, it was the most like myself I'd felt in months. The second page came to me through Fletcher Boyd. Now that requires explanation. Fletcher Boyd has been my neighbor, former neighbor, for 11 years. Retired firefighter. Fixes everything with the same 3 tools and an attitude. Makes the best smoked brisket in a 4-block radius and absolutely knows it. His wife, Carla, and Gloria have been friends since before either of them will admit. Fletcher is not a complicated man. He says what he means what he says, and has the emotional range of someone who has pulled people out of burning buildings and decided that most civilian problems don't quite clear the bar. I trust him completely. He showed up at Ryan's door Wednesday morning. Apparently Gloria had called Carla, who told Fletcher, because that is how information moves between our households, like a telephone game that somehow always arrives accurate, with a paper bag containing 2 coffees and an envelope. Ryan let him in. Fletcher looked at me across the kitchen, set the bag down, and slid the envelope across the counter, without ceremony. Conrad called me, Fletcher said. Said you'd need this. Said you'd need a friend when you'd read it more than you'd need a lawyer. I looked at the envelope. Same handwriting, same deliberate calm of a man writing against a clock. For Ted. Page 2. Read this one alone. I looked at Fletcher. He called you 8 months ago, Fletcher said. You asked him to. I picked up the coffee, took a long sip, set it down. Ryan, I said, give your old man a minute. Ryan looked at Fletcher. Fletcher gave him the nod, the kind of nod that retired firefighters give that means it's handled. Give the man his space. Ryan disappeared down the hallway, with the quiet obedience of someone who has recently discovered that his father planned everything and is still processing the magnitude of that. Fletcher sat across from me. You staying? I asked. You asked me to, he said simply. I opened the envelope. The second page started mid-sentence. Like it was continuing a conversation the first page had begun. Like the man writing it knew exactly how the other letter would land, and had deliberately left a door open at the end of it. And before you get too comfortable thinking you've got the whole picture, there's something I didn't put in the first letter. Something I couldn't put there because Gloria might have found it. And this part isn't for Gloria yet. This part is for you. I slowed down. I've been keeping something since February. Something Dr. Briggs told me at the second appointment. The one I went to alone, the one I told Gloria was a follow-up about my blood pressure. My stomach tightened. She told me that the rate of progression in my case is slower than average. Significantly slower, she said, and I'm writing her exact words because I want you to have them. Ted, if you manage stress, stay socially engaged, and maintain routine, there is a realistic possibility of several years of high functionality before significant decline. I stopped breathing for a moment. Several years. I didn't tell Gloria because in February she was already barely holding herself together. I didn't tell Ryan because Ryan would have Googled it for 6 hours and come back with 17 conflicting studies and a spreadsheet. I needed to sit with it myself first, decide what it meant, decide what to do with it. Here is what I decided. The house needed to go regardless, not because I'm disappearing tomorrow, but because the upkeep was becoming a weight neither Gloria nor I needed to carry. And I knew that if I waited until I absolutely had to move, I'd have lost the ability to make that call cleanly. I wanted to make it while it was still mine to make. So I made it. But Ted, listen to me. This is not the ending. This is the intermission. I set the page down for a second, looked at Fletcher. He was watching me with that steady, unhurried patience of a man who has sat with people in the worst moments of their lives and learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply not leave. You knew, I said. Conrad told me the broad strokes, Fletcher said. Not the details, just enough to know you'd need someone sitting across from you when you got to the middle of that page. I picked it back up. What I need you to do with this information is not spiral. I know you. You'll want to immediately restructure something, make new plans, call Conrad and start rearranging. That is the logistics brain talking, and right now I need you to tell it to sit down. What I actually need you to do is this. Tell Gloria. Tell her the real numbers, the real timeline. Not to give her false hope. Dr. Briggs was clear that slower progression is still progression. But because she has been carrying a grief that is heavier than it needs to be right now, she thinks she's already losing you. She deserves to know she has more of you than she thought. Tell Ryan too, but tell Gloria first. Always Gloria first. And then, Ted, pay attention. I need you to do something you have never been good at. I need you to receive. You've spent 64 years giving, providing, managing, fixing, being the one who holds it together so nobody else has to. And I know, that the idea of being on the other end of that feels like humiliation to you. It feels like losing. It isn't losing. It's just a different kind of strength. The kind that lets other people be strong for you. The kind that says, I trust you enough to need you. Gloria has been waiting her entire marriage for you to need her. Let her. And Ryan just needs his father present. Not performing, not managing, just present. Whatever version of present you can give him, give it fully. That is all he has ever wanted from you. You know that. You've always known that. There is one more thing. I turned the page over. There was a final paragraph written slightly smaller, like he'd almost forgotten it, and then caught himself. I went back to the Eastern Fork in Colorado once more before I came to see Conrad. Drove up alone on a Tuesday. Caught 4 trout. Sat by the water for about 2 hours doing absolutely nothing. It was the best 2 hours I've had in years. I want you to go back there. Not to escape, not to avoid, but because you deserve to have a place that's just yours. A place where you're just a man by a river with a fishing rod and nothing to manage. Everybody needs a place like that. Yours is the Eastern Fork. Ted, March 14th. P.S. Don't let Ryan drive. He still brakes too late. I put the letter down, sat with it for a moment. That particular kind of sitting where you're not really sitting at all. You're falling very slowly and quietly through the floor of yourself. Fletcher didn't say anything, which was exactly right. Finally, I picked up my coffee, took a long sip, and looked across the table at the man who had driven over on a Wednesday morning with a paper bag because a version of me had thought to ask him to. Fletcher, I said. Yeah, I want to say something and I need you to not make it weird. He leaned back. No promises. I'm glad you're my friend, I said. I know I've never said it like that, but I'm glad. Fletcher picked up his coffee, looked at it, set it down. Ted, he said, you're the most aggravating, most self-sufficient, most infuriatingly capable man I have ever met in my life. He paused. And I'd drive across this city for you any day of the week. I nodded. Good, I said. Now don't make it weird. You already made it weird. Fair enough. I told Gloria that evening. We were sitting on the small balcony of Ryan's apartment. Ryan had gone to pick up dinner, bless that boy's timing, and the October sky was doing its best work. All amber and indigo and the kind of fading light that makes everything look like a painting someone is slowly finishing. I told her about the second appointment, the real numbers, Dr. Briggs's exact words, several years of high functionality. Gloria was quiet for a long time. Then she turned to me and said, and her voice was steady in a way I hadn't heard in months, Ted Brenson, did you sit on that information for 8 months to protect me? I did, I said. That, she said, is the most loving and most infuriating thing you have ever done in 29 years. In 29 years, I reached over and took her hand, just held it, didn't say anything clever, didn't manage the moment, didn't perform composure or deflect with a joke, just held her hand while the sky finished its painting, and she leaned her head against my shoulder the way she used to in the car, on long drives back when Ryan was small and asleep in the back seat, and the whole world felt manageable, and endless, and ours. What do we do now? She asked quietly. I thought about the letter, about the Eastern Fork, about the river and the trout and the 2 best hours in recent memory. I think, I said, we go fishing. She lifted her head and looked at me. Ted, I don't fish. No, I said, but you sit beautifully, and I could use the company. She laughed. And I want you to understand something about that laugh. After everything, the porch steps, the locked door, the folder on Conrad's desk, the 2 letters from a man who was me but felt like someone I was still catching up to. After all of it, that laugh was the clearest thing I'd heard in months. I don't know how this ends. Nobody does. That's the part that doctors can't put in a folder or write on a timeline. The part that doesn't fit in any plan, no matter how thorough you are. But here is what I know. I know that on a Thursday evening in October I sat on a porch steps outside a house that used to be mine and didn't fall apart. I know that somewhere in March, the best version of me sat down at a desk and wrote 2 letters and called a lawyer and called a neighbor and built a net to catch himself before he fell. I know that my son picks up on the first ring now. I know that Gloria doesn't pretend anymore. And I know that somewhere in Colorado, the Eastern Fork is waiting, cold and clean and completely indifferent to diagnoses and timelines, and the particular cruelty of a mind that forgets. Just water over rocks. Just a man with a fishing rod. Just today. And today I remember everything. If you liked this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more real, raw, and family-centered stories. And as always, thank you for being a part of this sphere.